And we are live.
Hello. I'm
Late.
sorry we've had a few little technical snaps this morning.
Yep.
But I believe we're all okay and ready to go. So I usually waffle for 5 or 10 minutes, but I won't bother this morning. Let's get this show on the road.
Thank the Lord for small mercies.
Absolutely.
Or as they say in Dublin, thank the Lord for small Murphys.
Murphys, yeah.
Indeed.
I'll do the joke.
I just want to verify that Martin can see us up top.
You're good to go.
Okay, fine. Then off we go.
It's actually not. Yeah, there you go. It's the viewer count's going up. So we are very excited today to have fresh off the latest and greatest. I still can't call it the Fest for Beatle fans.
Call it the Beatle Fest
It's
if you
Beatle
want
Fest.
to.
Come on now.
What they can do.
The one and only Mr. Research, Mr. Beatles, Mr. Radio, Mr. Everything Everywhere All at Once, Mr. And I'm going to pronounce this right, and there's a story. Tom Frangione.
That's
Hi,
right.
Tom.
Hello, Tom.
I got to tell you, thank you so much for that warm welcome. And it must be something about the McCartney genes somehow. You're the only ones who really pronounce it fully correctly.
Well, we've had classes on the subject. We've had instructions.
I bet. Well, it'll play into a good story I'm going to tell you later when we talk about Paul a little bit. It's a pretty funny story.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it is. It is cute, and I used your image in my little promo banner.
I saw that. Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Yeah, you never know. Since The Sopranos and everything was, they sort of had this New Jersey Italian American pronunciation. So you never know if it's Manigot or Manigotti.
Yeah. Well, we go back even further than The Sopranos. You go back to The Godfather, right? Some of them called him Don Corleone, and some called him Don Corleone, right?
Yeah.
So, it's steeped in tradition.
Yes. Must be very annoying for you when people get it wrong, though.
No, it's, I actually even use it on the air. And, when I answer the business phone, Tom Frangione. Here in America, it's just, I guess it's kind of the Americanized version. But if I ever said that in front of my dad, who God bless us is with us at 92, he'd make it a point to correct me on that.
Well, and rightly so. Yeah. You could fix it once and for all and do like we did and put a Y on the end of it.
Yeah, there you go. Or an IE at the end, leaves no doubt. Yeah.
No, but then you could tell everyone we're cousins because it ends in EY, right?
Yeah.
Well, that worked for me, know.
Yeah. Alan Williams, who was, the earliest sort of manager of the Beatles, he used to call me Mrs. McCarthy.
With a TH.
Yeah. With a TH.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And he'd say, how's Mr. McCarthy doing?
Oh, my. Well, in that famous headline of the Beatles in the Mersey Beat poll when they won they spelt it McCartry.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, I know.
That's right. Yeah, I got crap for that at school as well, and I got called McCart horse when I gained some weight. So.
Oh my God.
McCart horse. That's nice.
Aren't kids fun?
Oh yeah.
Kids are wonderful.
They're only cute.
Have you seen a commercial that drives us nuts? 1-800-7 cars for kids.
Oh yeah.
For kids today.
Yeah, donate them straight away. Donate the kids.
Donate the kids. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend in Texas, Barry Coffing, who runs musicsupervisor.com. He's got 4 kids, and he says they're only cute to save their damn lives.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
Anyway, we're getting off the subject.
All right, fine.
We are waffling. We promised we wouldn't, but we are.
Okay.
So, Angie's the burning question.
Yeah. How did you get started in radio, Tom?
Well, I tell people it was the world's longest internship, 55 years.
Nice one.
Actually, I didn't do it I guess what you would call the traditional way, by studying radio, studying voice, and all of that. I got into it like pretty much I got into every other thing in my life, good, bad, or indifferent, through the Beatles. So by being starting out, of course, like everyone, this is a huge Beatles fan, of course, but by going to things like the Fest and playing the trivia competition and hearing the guest speakers and reading books about them, and then learning to play guitar, where I've become a legend in my own room on that instrument.
In your own lunchbox.
Yeah. Learning how learning a little bit more about, music and construct. And then I studied music in school, got my degree in that as well as business, but got the degree in music so I could study, at least construct and theory and things like that, and really realized just how good they were. And of course, all that is running parallel to this, being a huge fan and collecting as much as I could whether it was live recordings, but then more importantly, hearing the studio tapes and the outtakes and the demos and hearing how the song started and how they finished. I mean, you don't have to look much further of a song than, say, Strawberry Fields Forever to hear what it sounded like at the very beginning and what it sounded like in its final form, to hear just how much creativity went into the process. So learning all of that, I became kind of a go-to your point, for radio. There was a proliferation of Beatles specials and, you know, recurring weekly programs, and I'd be invited to guest host. And I think, looking back, a lot of times it was just so that they could ask me, why don't you bring some of those rare things out of your collection and we'll play them here, which we did, but also get to talk about whatever the topic was, whether it was an anniversary or an upcoming release or a recent release, even by one of the solo Beatles, or a compilation of, you know, coming out of the Beatle camp. And that's kind of how I got into radio. And then
what years would that be? When
this would be any time from, probably my college years, which would be the early 80s, right up, you know, till 5 years ago. That was pretty much my exposure to radio. I would help write things and proofread things and guest for shows like Joe Johnson's Beatle Brunch. I'm sure you guys know Joe.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, he's a great friend and a great Beatles fan and a great radio host. Yeah. And he used to call me the script doctor. He'd run things past me and say, just let's make sure we have this right before we go out. And then a few years ago, unbeknownst to the entire world, except the people who were putting it together, they were putting together the Beatles Channel. I didn't know about it when it was announced. It was really the world's best kept secret.
Wow.
And I was invited to audition for a talk show called the Fab Forum, which started, you know, the week that the channel launched in 2017 and is continuing. I think this week is our 300 and something show, where each week on Wednesday nights, our biggest guest is the callers. We have people call in, and the mantra is, let's talk anything Beatles. You want to talk about the fest this weekend? Have at it. You want to talk about, you know, you just found an old album by George Harrison that you never knew existed and you love it? Let's hear about that. You remember seeing them on the Ed Sullivan Show? Bring it on. And it's a
great show. It really is.
Yeah. So I do that show with a couple of co-hosts, Dennis Elsis, a great radio legend here in the New York area, and Bill Flanagan, just a terrific interviewer who's been with VH1 and MTV for many years.
Yeah.
And you can still see him on CBS News doing music specials.
Yes.
So the three of us we're like the three-legged stool, you know, for different corners of our callers. And then we have special guests who will call in. And they might be musicians who have worked with the Beatles, maybe people in Ringo's all-star band. Might be people from the old Beatle days and Apple days, or it might just be well-known people who just happen to be huge Beatles fans. They could be, you know, a television personality, a movie actor or actress, or an athlete, or anybody, to talk about what the Beatles meant in their lives.
Yeah.
And we do that each and every week on Wednesday nights. We do it live. And
that's why you get, it's such a wonderful, varied program every week. You never know what you're going to get, do you?
What amazing.
No, you don't, particularly with the callers. I mean, we get everything from, you know, I was John's roadie, you know, for a few shows in the early 70s, up to, hey, I'm 10 years old and we had to read this Beatles book in school, and I got 100 on the test at the end, and now I just bought the Yellow Submarine DVD and I love that. And you hear how people are passing it down generation to generation.
So multi-generational, isn't it?
Well, that's what amazing. And also not just multi-generational, but international. And it's, you know, how the Beatles have touched so many lives.
Oh, you bet.
Out of 8 billion people, I'm willing to bet 50% of the planet's at least heard of the Beatles.
Oh, that's a very conservative estimate. Yeah. I mean, they've touched everybody, and we always think about it in this way, and I think most people would agree. Sure, you could have let's say a Rolling Stones channel, right? They have certainly more recorded output than the Beatles as a group. You could have a Bob Dylan channel. In fact, we do have a Grateful Dead channel, right? But not everyone has a Grateful Dead story. virtually everyone somehow, some way has a Beatles story. It's really, really interesting. And even it might be, one degree of separation. My next door neighbor is one of the biggest collectors in the world. My sister called into the show one night with her Beatles story. She's a bit more detached from it than me, but she said, at my wedding, my older brother, and she didn't say who she was, of course, my older brother made sure that the band played a song for me called Michelle, because that's her name, to dance with me, at my wedding. How about that brother of mine? And then, of course, Bill and Dennis must have saw the look on my face, and they said, Michelle, by any chance, would we know your brother? So the cat gets out of the bag too. But the thing with it being a live show is we're also able to do a little bit of current events. Big headline stuff. Like last week, it was, hey, guess what? Paul has just announced he's going back on the road.
That's
and there are tickets on sale for Australia and Brazil. Yep. And you can get them through paulmccartney.com, because there is a contingent of the fandom that will travel and plan their vacations around going to see him.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, we've got lots of relations in Australia, and they're all raring to go about this.
They're all excited.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
I'm just so proud of him, because my husband Martin runs McCartney.com, which is the McCartney Times, the daily Beatle newspaper blog. Right. And it's great, because I joked last week, well, God love him, he's in his 80s, he's out there putting the hard yards in, so I can sit on the couch with my feet up, and
I have to tell you, we saw Paul, he finished his Got Back tour in America anyway, last year here, very close to where I live in New Jersey, and we saw him, it was a couple of nights before he turned 80, and his next gig was the big Glastonbury Festival in England, and we said, okay, that's what I want. I want to be 80 and be able to sing Helter Skelter in front of 200,000 people. That's what I want. Absolutely. Okay, how many people can put that on their resume?
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, that age group still working is really only Mick and Keith and Ringo and Paul.
Well, I mean, you get a couple more, that are
Joni Mitchell, but she's not in the greatest of health, but she's back out on the road. But to the extent at which he does it for like 3 hours.
Yeah, and at the level he does it.
Right. I mean, I think he thinks he's Taylor Swift. Nobody's actually told him he's had his 80th birthday. I think he still thinks he's 22. I say this in the nicest way. He's a freak of nature. He's some different kind of human. All you have to do is watch him. He's still performing at a very high level, creating music at a very high level. And in a little while, maybe we'll talk about, I got to spend an afternoon with him this past year for a radio special. He is sharp as a tack. And as I say, he checked all the good boxes. He was funny and insightful and forthcoming and sharp and friendly. And I mean, if you made a list of good adjectives, he hit every box. I think, a lot to do with it is, well, you can tell that he just adores his fans. His fans are everything.
Yes.
He knows, like I've said previously, John Lennon used to call them the customers, right? He knows that he would be probably just singing and playing piano in a pub in Liverpool if it wasn't for the fans, right?
Of course,
He'd be doing something in music. And I think a lot to do with it as well is the working class Northern Liverpool work ethic that my dad will have instilled in him and Mike and me growing up, is that, the devil makes work for idle hands. If you've got a talent, do something.
Do something, exactly.
If you can still do it to a level where you're getting enjoyment, I mean, look at the people he employs and the sales tax that he brings to town, and just the joy. It must be great to be able to go to bed at night and just have that much joy in your heart, knowing that you got to do what you loved and 200,000 people loved it too.
Yeah. And, much the same can be said for Ringo, of course. He's a couple years older, right? He just,
100%,
right. He just turned 83 and is still doing it with his all-star band.
That's right. And one of our clients, Edgar Winter, is in Ringo's band. And loving it. Edgar's in his mid-70s now, just won his first Grammy. Yay. And, they've got the young guns, as they call them, the Greg Bissonets of the world, backing him up. But Ringo's in great shape. He's 83. I mean, but again, it's that Liverpool work ethic. Angie's 93 and she's working on her 5th book, which is coming out in November. She could just we live in a nice little spot in Southern California and the weather's generally good. She could, quote, retire, but
That's a dirty word to me.
No.
Yeah.
Somebody interviewed me the other day and said, well, so what are your retirement plans? I said,
So
well,
what's that?
when they screw the lid down, that's when I'll retire. But maybe not.
No.
But
Yeah,
maybe not.
the good part with certainly Paul and Ringo is that it's clear they don't have to do it for the money, right?
No.
They're doing this because this is what they love doing.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, it's fantastic.
So coming back to your 90-minute show that you had with Paul, how on earth did you manage to pull
How did it come about?
so much time?
Well, following up the question you had about radio, these days I am heard on the Beatles Channel, SiriusXM 18, doing a number of shows, not just the Fab Forum, but I have a rarity show that plays once a week called Way Beyond Compare. When I say once a week, they put it in rotation and it repeats, but it's a new one every week. Do one called Apple Jam, which focuses on Mary Hopkin and James Taylor and Billy Preston and Badfinger, a band I truly love. All the bands that recorded for Apple.
Yep.
And I write the show called Across the Universe, which celebrates John's life and music. So I kind of have a decent footprint in there in SiriusXM. And last year, last year was the 40th anniversary of my favorite of not only Paul's solo albums, but frankly, any of the four of them. It's an album called Tug of War, which he put out in 1982.
Great record.
And I had interviewed Ringo similarly the year before. It was on Zoom, but it was a one-on-one to do a similar anniversary interview for the album Stop and Smell the Roses, which Paul was a big part of.
Right.
So that went well, and I think that was kind of my audition unofficially to say, what happens when it's Paul.
Next time.
And we put in the request. We work very closely with Apple and Paul's team at MPL. And, we give them all kinds of requests, you can imagine, as everyone does. We'd like to interview Paul about this. We'd like to have that. We'd like to have this. And, you have to be a little selective. But
there's only one of him.
Yeah. Well, that came
popular.
through loud and clear, when we were arranging it. They said, please be respectful of his time. You can't just say, oh, can we just stick around for a little more or 5 more questions? Or no, they gave us a allotted amount of time and we stuck to it. And he, as I said before, was brilliant that day. It was funny, getting in to see him.
Yeah.
They introduced me to him. They don't have to introduce him to me. I kind of know who he is, right?
Yeah, right.
But we had met once or twice over the years briefly for a handshake or something like that.
Yeah.
Nothing, of this magnitude. And as we were saying hello, he gave me that kind of look of familiarity. Like, I think I've met you before. And
I know you.
So good.
I said, the last time was literally right before COVID. We were at the Abbey Road anniversary party in Abbey Road. And he said, he was so polite. He said, oh, of course. How could I forget? Right.
Yeah.
And I actually had to kind of, I thought it was appropriate to bring him back in and say, well, yeah, actually, my girlfriend struck up quite a conversation with Nancy, his wife, because they're both Jersey girls, both here from New Jersey. And he said, oh, whereabouts in New Jersey are you from? And I told him we're only about 10 minutes from Nancy's family. And he says, oh, are you in Metuchen or Plainfield or Edison? And he starts naming all the neighboring towns. And I said, well, go one more. It's Scotch Plains. I said, if you're passing through there, you ever need a place to hang your hat or anything, feel free to knock, of course. But so we got off to a very, very pleasant start.
Great.
And he seemed very, very at ease for the interview. And this special that we made, I had a full 1 hour of interview time with him. And of course, when we made the special, we fleshed it out with all the songs. The idea was to talk about each of the songs, all of the guests on the album, not the least of whom is Ringo and Carl Perkins and Stevie Wonder and Stanley Clarke and right down the line. And he was very forthcoming, very funny, and sharp as a tack, recalling a lot of the detail. Not just about the songs and the studio recordings, but the backstories to them, why he wrote them, how he wrote them. He told a great story when we were talking not about a specific song, but talking about the concept in general, Tug of War. And he said he wrote that kind of thematically because he thinks it stems from him being a Gemini. Tug of war, pushing, pulling, black and white, ebony and ivory. And he said, well, gee, I'm thinking it might be to do with the fact that I'm a Gemini. But as he's saying this, in my mind, I'm saying, I can play this clip every time I play the song Hello Goodbye. Now, can I? you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
And the rest of the interview literally went like that. He told many, many stories. There are a lot of Beatles tentacles into that album. You know, I
Right.
knew he's going to talk about Ringo. Ringo's the drummer on the album. I
Sure.
knew he'd talk about George Martin. George produced the record.
Right.
He went further, talked about Jeff Emmerich, who engineered it. But and certainly, you know, we knew he'd be talking about John because the centerpiece of the album is the song Here Today.
Yeah.
But if I had woke up in the morning that day and you said, he's going to tell you a story, not about George Harrison, but about George's parents, well, I would have just said, you're crazy. But that's how the day went. The George Harrison story with George's parents was just, I had to, as I tell people, I had to be like the kid in The Exorcist. My head had to be spinning around
Yeah.
telling these stories. He was talking about the old Liverpool days when we were discussing the song Ballroom Dancing. And he said, yeah, that's, you know, a fond look back. And you know why we look back so fondly about it? Because we were never any good at it, about being dancing. He says, you know, but we would go to the dances, George and me, and his sister Louise would be getting all dolled up, the dress and the makeup and the hair and the
Rialto, probably.
Yeah, and he said there was something special for working class Liverpool to, you know, to go out on the town for something
Dance
like
hall
that.
on a Thursday night,
Yeah, and he
and
said,
you know what? Men used to take a separate pair of shoes in a brown paper bag and change into their dancing shoes when they got there.
there you go. Well, he told
Dance
the
in the
story.
shoes, they come on the
Yeah,
bus, tram.
he told us, you know, at the social club or the dance hall, George's parents were like the lead dancers. They were the expert dancers.
Fantastic.
And the floor would clear and they would be the ones like, this is the last waltz, and they would lead the whole thing. And of course, one, I've never heard this story, so again, my head has to be spinning, but in my radio mind, I'm thinking, well, I guess I can play that story every time I play George singing I'm Happy Just to Dance with You. Now, can't I? So to say that we got radio gold out of him would be a gross understatement. In fact, you know, the stories that he told, and by linking all the Beatles stories in, we were very, very honored that the interview and the special was presented to the New York Festival International Radio Awards, and it won a medal for best music special. So we were dead chuffed, if I can borrow a term, about that. It was, you know, a feather in the cap for the entire Beatles Channel team, our producer Adam Saltzman and Carl Kranz and all the guys that worked on it, including our VP Lou Simon. So we were real pleased with that. And actually, you know, having done that, you know, I had played the interview for Mark Lapidus. We were talking before about being fresh back from the Beatle Fest. And he said, well, we have to play this at the fest. And this is going back to March when it was here in New Jersey.
Right.
And, you know, we'll play it in the ballroom and we'll play it in the video room. And, you know, hey, it's a win for everybody because the interview is longer than the special. We didn't use the whole thing. So we said, well, if people are subscribers and they heard the special, there's more to the interview than they heard.
Great.
If they were subscribers and for some reason missed it, well, that's all new. And certainly if they're not subscribers, they can hear what we do on the channel. And I was very perplexed about it. Certainly I was honored to be asked to do it. And the Beatles Channel gave us the green light to do it. But I said, it's going to be a dark ballroom listening to two guys gab about the Beatles. Well, of course, one of them is a Beatle, so that's pretty good. I said, but I need something. I really wanted something that kind of keep people really engaged, really enwrapped in it. And I worked with an artist here in New Jersey. She does digital graphics and design and motion, named Natalie Palumbo. And she put together a visual accompaniment to this that there's no other way I could say this other than it will knock your eyes out. You truly can't take your eyes off it.
Wow.
And when we paired the two together and presented it at the fest, both in New York back in April or March, and then just this weekend in Chicago, it was very, very well received. So we were glad to bring that out for people.
Well, I'm sorry I wasn't there. I too would have been chuffed as little monkeys, as we say.
There you go.
That's how radio and visuals and the multimedia arts are growing together is something we love here at McCartney Multimedia. That's what we do is,
Right.
we bring all of the elements together. And in fact, my husband Martin's project, Geist Music with a K, it's kind of like Harry Potter for grown-ups. You can't really talk about it as an album because every song has a music video, an intro and an outro, sound design and actors talking about it. But I think this is what the Beatles were very instrumental and pioneering in with, Magical Mystery Tour, right? I mean, they wanted to have the visuals and the music and the story and the characters and the bus and the people. Way before its time.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, even, you could make the case going back to the films they did before Magical Mystery Tour when they did Help and Hard Day's Night. There was, there's the storyline, and then all of a sudden they're playing the song on a train or they're playing the song out.
I know. Yeah, it was revolutionary, wasn't it, in those days?
They were like long form music videos if you think about those films, right?
But that's exactly what they were. In fact, Dick Lester, years ago, he won something like an MTV Pioneer Award. They called him the father of the music video, and he said, "I demand a blood test."
That's funny.
Lovely.
Well, some of the music videos you see nowadays.
Yeah. So, Dick, of course, having worked with the Beatles so early on. So, but that was his take on the whole video thing.
Yeah, we flew out to the Bahamas in late January, early Feb of 1965.
Yeah.
In fact, it was
my honeymoon, actually. Yeah. We got married in the November.
And they were filming, and I think they thought, "Oh, that's a good, Angie rang."
Well, we got on to Alistair Taylor, the office, and said, "We want to go on a little trip somewhere. What do you reckon?" He said, "Well, leave it with me. I'll do some research and get back to you." And he did. The next day, he said, "How about the Bahamas? Because the boys are going out there to film some skiing sequence of."
No,
that was
Obertown.
Obertown
On March 15th.
That's right. It was some
water's coming out of the water.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually going into the water and reversing the film.
That was the one, I think, where Mal Evans came out of the water.
That's right. In Help. Yeah. Yeah. There's a great, I'm sure, Mal, you guys know his story, or
absolutely.
If you're like me, I found out recently, I only think I know his story. There's I know,
I'm dying for Ken Womack's book in November.
Yeah, Ken Womack, great Beatles historian.
He was just on TeaFlix about 6 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is actually coming out on Angie's birthday.
On my birthday. So
if anybody's wondering what to get her for her 94th.
Kenny presented at the fest this weekend, did an audio-visual presentation because he is working with Mal's family and his son.
Right, that's right,
Gary.
So they've made all his diaries and photos and things available. And he did a presentation of this where, I mean, people's eyes were bugging out of their head looking at this. Now, this is going to be, you say, I look at my Beatles bookshelf over there. There are books on everything from their lives, their loves, their music to the Beatles cartoon. And you say, what other angle is there to write about? And here you go. And now it's from the eyes of their roadie, their confidant. He was more than a roadie. We think today roadie is the guy that plugs in the amps, but he was their road manager and took care of so much for them.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, he was lovely. He was a gentle giant. I always, if we would occasionally go to gigs with, screaming fans, and I'd be 5, 6, 7 years old. And if Uncle Mal was there, I knew I was in big, giant, safe hands. That was
I imagine you would be. So that's
a book into the limo and throw a blanket over and say, "Get down and stay down."
Yeah. He would pick me up on the side of the stage or backstage and put me over his shoulder with a blanket and rush me out through the screaming fans. He was awesome.
No, that's a book I'm truly looking forward to.
We are too. And there are always other angles. And in fact, Angie will have a book also out in November called "There Are Faces I Remember," and I have spent. They're all the people that she met through the Beatles orbit. The family, the fifth Beatles, the tributes, all of those people, and her personal stories, and all the celebrity fans and so on. And I have spent 2.5 years digitally painting all these people. So it's going to be a square coffee table book, full color, and it'll be quite the thing.
I look forward to that. Now, one of the last books you guys put together had something that was so cool in each chapter. It had the little QR codes where you could scan it. you're
Ruth
gonna have
Falcon. Yeah.
you're gonna have all that
Yes.
in the new book.
Oh, yes.
'Cause that
Yes.
was really fantastic. Just opened
Yeah.
a whole world behind
There
it.
Yeah.
are, well, it came, the idea came to Martin, my husband and I. It's called McCartney Smart Book Technology. And it came to us when people were in their family intergenerational bubbles and sitting, young kids. There are some people who are like, the classic line, what? Paul McCartney was in a band before Wings.
Yeah.
There are some people who don't know he was in the Beatles. So we looked at that because I built a real estate QR company about 12 or 15 years ago with a gentleman out of Dallas, Texas, Paul Ritz. And it got wound up into Remax in the end. The idea behind it was if you're driving past a house and it's freezing cold or they're out of leaflets, you scan the code and you see the virtual tour of the house. So we launched that in 2008 or 2000, something like that. So QR codes have always been a huge thing to me. And when the pandemic hit, I thought about all the grandparents, parents, and grandkids locked together in their bubbles, reading about things, and how this could be a great discovery journey for grandpa to sit and read a chapter about the night the Beatles changed America and appeared on Ed Sullivan, and the kid can scan it with the code and then go see the video. So,
no, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No, it's really added another. Again, it's multimedia. It's like Natalie Palumbo putting visuals to your audio thing. There's no reason why. That's why I think that crazy film won the Oscar, Everything Everywhere All at Once. We've all become so consumed with media that, adding other layers onto things certainly doesn't hurt. And this new book, There Are Faces I Remember, has several QR codes, and especially the people who have been on TeaFlix. The episodes will all be featured, you see, so you get all the extra goodies.
Fantastic.
So now radio isn't your only talent. We've been reading a foreword of a book that you recently wrote, which is so well written. It's absolutely fantastic. Tell the folks about that project. And
it's the Beatles Fab But True, is it called?
Yep.
That's right. It's Fab But True. It's written by a guy named Doug Wolfberg, who.
Yes, I want to get in touch with him if you could.
He'd be delighted to do this show.
Good.
I'll steal just a little of the thunder, but it's all good about Doug. He reached out to me a couple years ago. I had never met him, but he reached out and said, he introduced himself, said he was working on this book, and would I want to do the forward, because the book is about. It's not a continuum of a story for a couple hundred pages. It's 15 or 16 chapters of different stories that have questions why, when, where, and how, that many Beatles fans, scholars, students think they may have heard the whole story on, but maybe they didn't. And he's such a good researcher. I guess it comes from his being a lawyer by trade. He has to dig into the facts, and that's all that matters, right? But he reached out to me saying, look, because you're the voice on SiriusXM that is considered the historian or expert. I'd love to have you write the foreword. And I said, well, it's nice to meet you. I said, but how's about letting me look at the manuscript? I read it and I was fascinated. First thing I said is, well, this is a book I would buy. Right, left unchecked. This is a book I would buy because it's interesting and well written and has some really good reference material and digs into the stories behind the songs. Now, I'm not going to do any spoilers or anything like that, but I'll give you for instance, right? Many Beatles fans know that the song "Come Together" with the song "Here Come Old Flat Top" got John into a little bit of legal hot water, right? And he had to cut the deal with. Basically with a gangster who was running a publishing company to record 3 of their copyrights. And John ended up spending tons of time in court and everything. And never mind not knowing this answer, I had never even reckoned the question. How is it that John got in trouble when the publishing says Lennon and McCartney? How is it possible Paul?
Interesting,
How is it possible Paul didn't have to go to court and Paul didn't end up, having to face down this mobster and
because he probably had a better lawyer.
Well,
they'd be doing all right now, wouldn't they, with politics?
Well, they, Doug digs into this and finds out just how that happened. And it starts out with a musical explanation. How many notes can you, do it before it's considered a copyright infringement, all that other good stuff. And of course, in the popular music and folk music traditions, borrowing goes on all the time, right?
Oh, yeah.
And at some point, look, how many people have copied? I mean, if the Beatles chose to, they could be in court all day with bands like Oasis and ELO, right?
100%.
For for all that, but they didn't, right? They viewed it as pretty much as respect and handing down the tradition.
Right.
And anyway, Doug digs into that story, and that was, I think, the story in the book where I said, okay, I'm sold. I'm good. I would be part of this project. I would like this. And I actually had to strong arm him a little bit myself, and I'm sure he won't mind me telling this story. I said, well, you've got a bunch of good stories, but boy, there's one in there that I think you should dig into. And that's the story of John and Paul giving the Rolling Stones a big hit called I Want to Be Your Man. A lot of people have told that story, including Paul. He tells it, before he'll play the song in concert. John tells it in interviews. And then on the Stone side, people like Andrew Loog Oldham, their manager, tells it, and everyone has a little bit of a different twist. And there are sometimes, okay, they got this right, but not this, only because it couldn't be. It was just it's not. Look, I wasn't in the room. Okay, I can't say, Paul, don't you remember this is how it happened? But when you look at the timeline of when the song was recorded, so somewhere along the line, I'll just give one little, for instance. Right, Loog Oldham says, well, they did this because they had just been out celebrating winning their first Ivor Novello Award. Well, that can't be true because they didn't win an Ivor Novello Award till 1964. And both the Stones and the Beatles put that record out in 1963. So again, whether it was some other award or whatever is far from moot, because depending on what award ceremony they were at, you can tell when it was written. And he very neatly and expertly pieces the timeline together. In a way that makes sense without denigrating down to legalese. Okay,
the forensic Beatles, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh yeah.
But I have to say, Tom, your foreword had me. I found it on Amazon yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Your writing of that foreword is
masterful.
Well, the really best compliment I can pay you is I put you on a level with Ray Connolly.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
That's pretty well.
I need a moment here. Hold on. No, Ray is obviously
he's verklempt. He's from Jersey.
Yeah.
He's verklempt.
It's an old Italian expression. I'm verklempt. Yes. No, thank you for that very generous compliment. Ray was one of the great rock
from the heart, I assure
time.
you. I was bowled over when I read it yesterday.
And it's Doug Wolfberg, and it's on Amazon, right? Fab but true, remarkable stories revealed.
I don't have my copy here at the desk. I sure wish I did. It's over on the bookshelf, but I don't want to go.
I'm going to go online after we finish today.
No, that'll be great. It was funny, you're talking about the book. Literally 10 minutes before I joined this, I was checking emails to see if there's anything from you guys about, hey, make sure you're on time or whatever. And I got one of those Amazon recommends email, and they recommended that I buy, like, here's a book you might like, Doug Wolfberg's, Fab Four. And there's my name on the front cover. I'm like, I wonder what was their first hint that this is a book I might like.
There's an algorithm at work for you.
Well, there's one thing, the algorithm works. That's for sure.
It's like Captain Obvious sent you an email, right?
You bet. But
well, this has been an absolute joy. We could talk forever, and maybe
I know it's after 12 o'clock.
I know it's amazing. We
great.
can maybe we can do episode 2 when this.
I'd be delighted.
When this book is out.
Yes,
and when the Mal book is out. And
I'd be delighted. Sure.
Have you opine and review and tell us what the SiriusXM fans
I might
think?
have to legally adopt you. Could we?
Then you get the EY. You definitely have to add the Y on the back of the name.
So we have to tell at least the story about Frangione. We'll tell that one as we go away. How's that?
Go ahead.
Please do.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so on the air and everywhere else, pretty much, hey, it's Tom Frangione, right? So we finished the interview with Paul, and I got like 2 minutes left, and I want my money's worth, right? So I said, hey, do you have time for a couple of housekeeping items? A photo, for the website for when we promote it? Sure. Said, could you read a couple of liners for us? And I had written them out, big block letters like you do.
Yeah.
And it was, hey, this is Paul McCartney here with Tom Frangione talking about Tug of War on the Beatles Channel or something like that. Right. And he read it and he said, hey, it's Paul McCartney here with Tom Frangione on the Beatles Channel. And he stopped and he was very conscious of this. He said, "Did I pronounce your name right?" He says, "Because if I didn't, I'll do it again." And I said, "Yeah." I told him, I said, "Actually, you did pronounce it right." I said, again, like we said before, Americanized, it's Frangione, but in Italian, you pronounce it with every letter. And he said, like, he got it kind of like clicked a switch for him. And he said, "I probably got that from Linda, because for years she was a great Italian cook." And then he started doing it the way I would, with the mozzarella and the pasta fagioli and frangione. And we had a good laugh. And, of course, on that list of housekeeping items, I had, my copy of Tug of War, which we took the picture with. And I asked him, I said, "Look, now that I've unwrapped it, would you mind defacing it a little bit?" And he wrote on there, "To Tom," and then in big phonetic block letters, "Hey, Frangione," with the
I
E.
know, I've seen it. It's lovely.
Cheers, Paul McCartney. Yeah, Ange has the image. You can find it on the website. And I just thought it was both hysterical and very touching. And now it becomes the definition of a conversation piece, hence this conversation, right? But I have it hanging on the wall behind me. And when people come to my house, they say, "Okay, what's that all about?" And I get to say, "Just a little joke between Paul and me."
Just a little personal thing between me and my buddy.
That's right.
Well, as you will know, if you, as our viewers certainly know, if
nobody gets out alive without one of our
limericks, right? And we usually get it wrong the first time, and this is very apropos that you just told this story. So we usually screw up the first one. So if we don't, we're good to go. But if we do, you get to hear it twice.
I'm going to
take two. Okay.
She's got to put her other bins on. Hang on. Bins are short Scouse for binoculars.
Binoculars, bins.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
With a 1, 2, 3. Frangione will not try to rhyme. Our Italian is not so sublime. Your legacy's serious, magical, and mysterious. Thanks for gracing us with this airtime.
That was perfect. If anything happened to me, you guys could take my spot on the air.
I was just going to say, if we got the job.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. That was very good.
In the words of John Lennon, did we pass the audition?
You have indeed passed the audition.
Oh, jolly good.
Well, this was fantastic. So all of your fans and friends, tell everybody where they can find you and all your show names and all that good stuff.
Sure. So the easiest place to find me is on your SiriusXM radio, Channel 18, the Beatles Channel. I have 4 shows that rotate, and they premiere at different times, but then they rotate depending what time zone you're in and all that. So the Fab, I'll give you all the East Coast times because I don't have to do the math. The Fab Forum goes out live on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, and that's a live talk show, and everyone's invited to call in. I do a rarity show called Way Beyond Compare, which is a half-hour show, a new episode every week that airs 4 times. I do a show with a guy named David Frick, who's just one of the great rock writers of all time. That's called Apple Jam, where we focus on Mary Hopkin and Badfinger and James Taylor and all the Apple records. And then we have a show called Across the Universe, which I write, which focuses on John's life and legacy. And that's a new show every week as well. By the way, I would probably not be doing my job if I didn't say, and all of those shows are available anytime you want on the SXM app. So that's where I can be found most days.
Excellent. Well, you are certainly a very valued and loved and admired part of the whole Beatle family for all the work you do, for the love you put in, for keeping this all alive.
Thank you so much.
It's a real honor to have had this much time with you. And let's do it again when some of these books come out.
Yes.
Deal me in. I'd be delighted to, Ruth.
Okay, good. Thanks, Tom.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, kids.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Peace and love.